Good morning. Here is your global news report for April 9, 2026. The ceasefire agreement between the United States and Iran has led to the resumption of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz and a sharp drop in crude oil prices, directly impacting the international economy. However, the agreement remains fragile due to Israel's continued attacks on Lebanon and Iran's retaliatory actions. Nations are also grappling with domestic economic stabilization, tax systems, price controls, human rights issues, immigration, and maintaining public order amidst the ripple effects of conflicts. The US and Iran, with Pakistan's mediation, have agreed to a 2-week ceasefire. However, Israel continues its attacks on Lebanon, while Iran has launched missile and drone attacks on Gulf states, hinting at a closure of the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump, while warning of the demise of civilization, called the ceasefire a complete victory, with uranium enrichment and sanctions relief being key focal points. Crude oil prices have plummeted, and stock markets have rebounded sharply. Global nations face economic pressures. Japan is debating a consumption tax reduction, the US is dealing with tax filing deadlines and healthcare record access, and Singapore is freezing prices of daily necessities. Russia is promoting veteran employment quotas and strengthening economic cooperation with Hungary, while domestic discontent rises due to tax increases and price hikes. Disruptions in international supply chains are affecting Indonesia's fertilizer subsidies and Japan's international passenger numbers. Human rights, immigration, and domestic unrest are major concerns. Japan is instilling fear in foreigners through deportations, while the US reports on abortion care and the expulsion of military spouses. China's BYD faces scrutiny over forced labor issues. Russia acknowledges casualties among Cameroonians conscripted for the Ukraine conflict, imprisons anti-war activists, and fuels domestic discontent through cyber attacks. Concerns about freedom of speech are also present in Israel. The fragile nature of the ceasefire is evident, with ongoing regional tensions and differing interpretations of the agreement's scope. Next, here are the key stories from the US. The US has agreed to a temporary ceasefire with Iran, leading to a stock market surge and a sharp drop in oil prices. Domestically, the Trump administration is attempting to expand access to federal employees' medical records, and the Democratic Party has achieved strong results in special elections. Care provision models are evolving in states where abortion is legal. Following President Donald Trump's agreement to a 2-week temporary ceasefire with Iran, U.S. crude oil prices, WTI, fell 18% to $92 per barrel, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 2.95%, the S&P 500 gained 2.56%, and the Nasdaq Composite increased by 3.46%, indicating a significant market reaction. The Trump administration's Office of Personnel Management, OPM, has proposed a regulation requiring 65 insurance companies, covering over 8 million individuals including federal employees, retirees, and their families, to report identifiable health data monthly, raising concerns about privacy violations. The Democratic Party has achieved strong results in recent special elections, recording their best outperformance of the Trump era in a special House election in Georgia, and a Democratic-affiliated state Supreme Court candidate won by a large margin in Wisconsin. Next, here are the key stories from Europe. Germany has clarified its government policy regarding military service, and a large-scale strike is planned by Lufthansa cabin crew. In the UK, discussions surrounding the use of international bases are deepening, highlighting emerging policy and social issues. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius stated that men of military age under 45 will not need prior approval for extended stays abroad, following controversy over the reintroduction of mandatory military service. In Germany, Lufthansa cabin crew are scheduled to go on strike for 1 day this Friday. In the UK, Labour Party leader Keir Starmer is facing pressure from within and outside the ruling party to restrict the use of British Air Force bases by the US, following threats made by former US President Donald Trump against Iran. Next, here are the key stories from the Middle East. Despite a 2-week ceasefire agreement between the US and Iran, Iran's continued attacks on Gulf states maintain regional tension. The ceasefire has eased market risk aversion, and the release of American journalists has also been reported. US President Donald Trump announced a 2-week suspension of attacks against Iran on April 7, conditional on Iran's agreement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Despite the ceasefire agreement, Iran launched a total of 94 drones and 30 missiles against Gulf states, 28 drones to Kuwait, 6 missiles and 31 drones to Bahrain, 17 ballistic missiles and 35 drones to the United Arab Emirates, and 7 missiles to Qatar. Although Lebanon was excluded from the US-Iran ceasefire negotiations, President Aoun welcomed a 15-day ceasefire. Meanwhile, in southern Lebanon, Israeli military attacks forced a humanitarian aid convoy organized by the Vatican Embassy to turn back. Next, here are the key stories from Russia. While welcoming the ceasefire agreement in the Middle East, Russia has also shown diplomatic tension by summoning the Japanese ambassador over Ukraine-related matters. Domestically, Russia is proceeding with the introduction of fines for violations of veteran employment obligations, indicating a range of activities both domestically and internationally. The Kremlin welcomed the ceasefire agreement between the US, Israel, and Iran, emphasizing the need for rapid de-escalation and political diplomatic dialogue. The Russian Foreign Ministry summoned the Japanese ambassador to Moscow to protest an investment by a Japanese company, TerraDrones, in a Ukrainian drone manufacturer, accusing the deal of significantly harming Russia's security interests. The Altai Republic in Siberia has announced the introduction of fines of up to 25,000 rubles, approximately $318, for companies that fail to comply with the veteran employment obligation enacted last year for the Ukraine war, 1.2% for companies with 100 or more employees. Next, here are the key stories from China. China's large AI models have dominated global usage rankings, showcasing its technological prowess. Furthermore, Premier Li Qiang has promoted diplomacy by calling for expanded trade with Australia. However, international challenges have emerged, such as BYD being blacklisted in Brazil due to slave labor conditions. China's large AI models are expanding their global usage, with the top 6 positions in OpenRouter's weekly usage rankings occupied by Chinese models. Alibaba's Qwen 3.6 Plus, free, secured the top spot with 4.6 trillion tokens. Chinese Premier Li Qiang held a phone call with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, expressing China's commitment to opening its market, increasing imports of high-quality Australian products, and expanding bilateral trade and cooperation. The Brazilian government has blacklisted Chinese company BYD due to alleged slave labor conditions, citing excessive working hours and poor accommodation at its Brazilian factory. Next, here are the key stories from Japan. Prime Minister Takaichi held a phone call with the Iranian president, requesting de-escalation of the Middle East situation and ensuring the safety of the Strait of Hormuz. Japan received protests from Russia regarding Japanese companies investing in Ukraine's defense tech. Domestically, the Japan Exchange Group has established a 3 billion yen investment framework for digital technologies, and Terumo has strengthened its R&D base in Costa Rica. Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi welcomed the US-Iran ceasefire agreement in a phone call with Iranian President Pezeshkian, emphasizing the importance of safe navigation in the Strait of Hormuz as an international public good, and requested the swift resolution for one Japanese national currently on bail. The Russian Foreign Ministry protested to Japanese Ambassador Ken Muto and Russia regarding the investment by Japanese company TerraDrones in a Ukrainian drone company, but Ambassador Muto countered the protest. The Japan Exchange Group, JPX, has established an investment framework of 3 billion yen for the utilization of digital technologies and AI, planning to invest several hundred million yen in about 10 startups to compete with overseas exchanges that offer 24-hour trading. Next, here are the key stories from Asia-Oceania. Singapore is freezing prices of daily necessities, and India and Bangladesh have agreed to normalize relations. India has also announced revisions to its health insurance system, marking significant developments in economic, diplomatic, and social policy. Singapore's largest supermarket chain, FairPrice, announced it will freeze prices on 100 daily essential items, including eggs, rice, and cooking oil, until the end of May, and double its Chaz discount to 6%. India and Bangladesh, following a visit by Bangladesh's foreign minister, have agreed to normalize relations, reactivate existing mechanisms, and strengthen trade and energy cooperation. India's insurance regulator, IRDAI, has established a subcommittee to review the current state of private health insurance in the country and propose regulatory and policy measures to promote broader coverage and financial protection. Next, here are the key stories from South America. The ceasefire agreement between the US and Iran and the subsequent tensions are the main news, while Paraguay's tourism sector is performing well, and criticism of Venezuela's policies is also being reported. A 2-week ceasefire was agreed upon between the US and Iran, but the ceasefire remains extremely unstable following Iran's renewed announcement to close the Strait of Hormuz after Israel's attack on Lebanon. The Secretary General of the Ibero-American Secretariat for Education, Science, and Culture, OEI, criticized U.S. President Trump's primary interest in Venezuela being oil rather than democracy, during remarks made in Paraguay. Domestic tourism in Paraguay during Holy Week reached 409,431 visitors, a 15% increase from the previous year, with a national average hotel occupancy rate of 90% and tourism revenue rising 36% to $55.5 million. That concludes today's Global News Report. Have a great day. Thank you for watching.